So I have the perfect recipe for an F1 weekend. No overtakes, DRS trains, plenty of French fries, a healthy dollop of mayonnaise, and a George Russell victory. Until it wasn't. Welcome back to Motorsport 101. Oh, just 1,500 grams short. It happens to the best of us. Hey, gang, I'm Dre Harrison, your friendly neighborhood host. Welcome to episode 536 of Motorsport 101. Glad you could join us as ever. And we're coming to you off the back of a really good Belgian Grand Prix. It was a very I enjoyed it. I very much enjoyed this Grand Prix. I like tactical races, and this one, it's kind of amazing how this was a Grand Prix that barely had a single overtake in it worth a damn, and I still very much enjoyed it. It's kind of amazing how that turned out in the end, but it was exciting for different, more strategical reasons, which we'll get into, of course. But I really enjoyed this one. And the final F1 race before the summer break, which we're now in the middle of. F1 takes 3 weeks off, as it does. 2 weeks now, there's going to be the summer shutdown, where everybody finally gets a bit of rest and relaxation, except for us, who's still chugging over here at Motorsport 101 with the content as per. So yes, our Belgian review is going on as we speak. And as you can probably guess, I'm joined by Mr. RJ O'Connell. How's it going, RJ? How's the Olympic fever going down?
Whoa, I am totally limped out, man. Basketball's going good.
Yeah.
Swimming's going great.
Yeah.
Skateboarding's been cool. There are many sports happening at the same time, so much that I can't keep track of them all, while also, doing my other job, and all the other bits, all the things are happening at once, and track and field is barely started.
Yeah, that doesn't even start until next week. It's been a heck of a time so far. That's the beauty of the Olympics for me. Watching the sports that you only really watch once every 4 years and pretending like you know what you're talking about as me, of course, Dre Harrison, newly found fencing expert, as you do. But very enjoyable as ever. GB doing all right. 6 golds on the board already. Some trap shooting. That was some fun. We got a beautiful rowing gold this morning on a photo finish, which was very exciting. We had a triathlon comeback for the ages from Alex Yee, Lewisham's finest from South London. We love him. Although, as I like to call him during the show, Alex Yeet. We just slapped the T and pretended he was Jey Uso. Arms up and down and everything. For ones of you pro wrestling fans out there. But yeah, very enjoyable time so far. I mean, if we've got to the really good stuff yet, which is, of course, it's the track and field. Lee Diffie, we miss you. Oh, as you do.
He'll be back soon. He'll be back sooner than later. Just you wait.
Just not in the series you thought he was going to be in. Ah, crap. We'll see how we go.
Oh, anyway. Boy, if you thought the discourse about, IndyCar doesn't have an American lead anchor voice is going to be insufferable in IndyCar, wait till that shit hits NASCAR.
Oh, boy. What do you mean he got an Australian to comment our goddamn race series? That's going to go over well. I can tell already. Lee Diffie will be great. Anyone who says otherwise is a hater. Anyway. Yeah, we'll be talking a little bit about the Belgian Grand Prix over the next hour or so. We've got a lot of news to get through as well. But we've got to talk about the Belgian Grand Prix. George Russell putting off one of the best drives of his career to win the Belgian Grand Prix until an hour later when it turns out he didn't win the Belgian Grand Prix because his car was illegal. We'll get into the reasons why and how it got to that point very shortly. We'll also be talking about a big amount of silly season moves. The big domino has finally fallen into place. Carlos Sainz, Williams driver for the next at least 2 years in 2025 going forward. And there's been some ripple effects already off the back of that. Esteban Ocon going to Haas as well. The end of Logan Sargent, Jack Doohan as well. We found out today as we're recording this on July 31st, Jack Doohan looking seemingly very close to joining Alpine and getting promoted into the seat for 2025 as well.
It's sometimes it's about the moves that you make, but sometimes it's about the moves you don't make. More on that shortly.
Indeed. A certain Mexican may or may not be involved in that. And yeah, a lot of Alpine reshuffling in general. So yeah, it was if anyone's suffering from deja vu about a infamous French team boss being sacked or relieved of their duties during the Belgian Grand Prix weekend, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it's happened twice. So we'll talk about Bruno Famin stepping down as an Alpine team principal and his replacement, which we'll get into as well very shortly. But before we do that, please let's get some general housekeeping out of the way in the places you can find this. So we're on YouTube, youtube.com/Motorsport101. If you want to listen to your podcasts on there, you can. It's the option now. You can check us on Facebook, facebook.com/Motorsport101. We're on Twitter. Elon Musk's failed business investments at Dre Harrison101. RJ is
now even more divorced because Republicans are weird.
Weird, and it's the new buzzword. It's like we've replaced woke with weird for the month. It's gonna be quite fascinating as you know.
And you know what? It's making them so angry. So I just say keep going.
Yeah, crack on. Weird people, etc. So if you'd like to follow the podcast directly on X, you can at motorsport_101. On Instagram as well, motorsport101 pod. You can check us out on there. And if you really like us, you can check us out on our website, motorsport101.com. We've got some bonus thoughts from yours truly. Talking about the Belgian Grand Prix itself and a new little mini series on there called The Run-In. By the time this episode goes out, you'll have read the first one on MotoGP, which is back this weekend for the British Grand Prix. More on that at the end of the show. A 3-part mini-series, it's like they're like mini mid-season reviews, thoughts, vibes going forward. MotoGP's is up first before their British Grand Prix weekend starts at Silverstone. It'll be IndyCar's turn next week, and then Formula One's the week after the last week of the summer break. So do check that out if you haven't already. And if you really, really like us, you can back us on Patreon, patreon.com/Motorsport101. Back us at any level, and you get some of our written stuff for early before it goes out anywhere else. You can get all of our early content, including episodes of the show itself at the $5 level. And if you back us at the $10 level, you can listen to these episodes live as they're being recorded, as well as get supporters club access on our Discord server. Some good stuff in there as ever.
It's the best bargain in motorsport media. Get in or get the F out.
Yeah, that, what RJ said. So all of that good stuff as ever. Right after this, we'll get into the 2024 Belgian Grand Prix.
This was a game of tactical warfare beside the Belgian Grand Prix at Spa-Francorchamps, historic Spa-Francorchamps, as a DRS train dominated the early proceedings. In the warm summer weather, the air was thick and nobody was getting past as easily as they thought they could. But for George Russell, he noticed the tire degradation wasn't a huge factor during this race. He asked Mercedes if he could consider going one stopper when everybody else was going two. With 15 laps to go, Mercedes obliged, and Russell got to the front of the queue. Lewis Hamilton and Oscar Piastri both hit Russell down in the closing stages, but they were unable to get past him, leading to George Russell taking his third career Grand Prix victory, his second win of 2024. Well, Dre, let's talk about it. Obviously, huge win here for George Russell. Great boost to his morale. Great boost to the team.
So I've always wanted to do that like Phoenix, right? Hold it. Also, we thought George Russell had won his second Grand Prix of 2024 because about an hour after the result was over, the FIA scrutineering department chipped in. And that's never a good sign in the immediate aftermath of a Grand Prix. And it was referred to the stewards that George Russell's car, despite having 2.8 kilos of fuel drained out of it, was 1.5 kilos below the 798 minimum weight limit in terms of kilograms. It was referred to the stewards, and well, you don't need me to tell you if you're listening to us at this point that that's a technical infringement breach. And if you breach a technical infringement, there is no ifs or buts. It is an immediate disqualification. Russell was disqualified from the results. He gets nothing for his brilliant drive, and it promoted Lewis Hamilton up to the win for his 105th, which is still a weird thing to say, 105th Grand Prix victory ahead of Oscar Piastri in second, and Ferrari's Charles Leclerc gets bumped onto the podium for an exceptional comeback drive of his own, really, to get on the podium for the prancing odds. It's... I have to say, RJ, it feels like such a shame for George, because I think that was a magnificent drive. It deserved the win. I think he was pretty much flawless in the way he handled that, and it unfortunately was almost a bit too good for Mercedes in the end.
Yeah, not the first win that seemed too good to be true in a major single-seater championship this year. Russell going with the one-stopper strategy was pretty exceptional. These tires were pretty much wearing each other out. I believe it was like a race where just like the mediums were junk. But Russell pulled it off. But, 1,500 grams off the car, every extra bit of weight you can shave off takes less stress off the tires. And Mercedes even admitted, this was our bad.
Yeah, Mercedes didn't contest this. They didn't argue against it. They held their hands up pretty much straight away and said this was our bad. Andrew Chauvelin, who does Mercedes post-race debriefs on social media, talked about it a little bit this morning and said, we knew that he was about 500 grams under after qualifying. They think that George probably just lost too much water weight over the course of the race to end up going underweight, because you do lose.
See how many people were trying to theorize if George Russell had just wet himself in the car, would that have gotten him over the weight limit without even realizing they made him without driver and fuel in the car, man.
Exactly. Yeah, and a lot of people theorized about this. I mean, I think the obvious theory is the correct one. Classic Occam's razor case. I think Mercedes didn't think about a one-stopper, and they probably didn't think about what effect that would have on the car. The extra wear, the lack of tread on the tyre, and then you combine with the fact that Spa is the longest track we race around. It's 7 kilometers long, almost to the meter, in terms of how long this is a track, and you do not get a cool-down lap at Spa. You don't get a traditional
cool-down. They turn the cars around so you don't run the whole track in like a round to go pick up stuff on the tires.
Yep. You turn them straight around, you put them through the pit lane backwards, and that's your Parc Ferme celebration. And that probably denied Mercedes a vital chance to pick up some extra marbles, some extra debris on the side of the track, and probably get that car the extra 1.5 kilos that would have kept their result valid. And yeah,
it was the same for everyone, though. That's the thing. Nobody had an opportunity to go pick up that extra weight off the tires, man.
Yeah, and I don't know what caused it. I don't know if again, he wasn't even the only guys who did a one-stopper, because I know Aston Martin did as well. Further down the field, Fernando Alonso, for example, ended up 8th. Also tried the one-stopper. Wasn't quite the same length of stint at the end. I know Russell was one of the first guys in, and that's what makes his run all the more impressive. It was a 34-lap hard tyre stint on a 44-lap Grand Prix. It was I feel really bad for George. This one was George did everything right. He drove incredibly well. He called his shot like Babe Ruth did. He said, look out for the one stopper. I thought it was just a flippant comment. I didn't read too much into it when it happened. And then he's still out there. He gets to the front of the queue, and then Merckx just gives him the green light. And yeah, he managed the gap brilliantly. Hamilton's right. Hamilton got 2 pretty good clean laps to maybe try a pass on George for the win. Didn't quite work out in the end. They shaved 75 meters off the DRS zone down the Kemmel Straight. They were trying to make passing more difficult here. And I think they got that right, quite frankly. A lot of people...
Yeah, because generally in the DRS era, DRS down Kemmel is busted.
Yes. It's worth 0.6. It's stupid powerful. My attitude has always been, and this is not me coming across like an old fuddy-duddy here for a second, but I would rather have passing be a little bit too difficult than it be a little bit too easy. I'd rather be slightly on the more difficult side of the scale because I want to see cars have the ability to be able to defend themselves. I don't want passing to be a foregone conclusion in the moment. Like, the track and the way the Kemmel Straight was, it rewarded you for nailing the source. If you got that corner right and you got the run down the hill towards Eau Rouge and Radillon, you were able to pass. You got the momentum. It wasn't impossible, but it rewarded you for driving well, which is what it should do. I think that's how racing should be in this instance. It shouldn't just be a foregone conclusion. And 6 tenths was the sweet spot. If you were 6 tenths in front, you were generally able to defend yourself. And I think that's how it should be.
Yeah,
I think
Oscar Piastri tried to close in on the top 2 at the end, but I had a feeling that if Hamilton and Russell were going to have trouble switching positions one after the other, I felt like it was just going to be a matter of time before Oscar just got stuck in that dirty hair. Give him credit though; he gave it a hell of a try, but he had another great performance. It's a shame for George, but as I've been told many times over the last several months, rules are rules. Your car's illegal. That win doesn't count. It was good strategy, though. I'm not gonna go out here like some failed knockoff Jimmy Broadbent at home and say that this is just insubordination from a selfish driver. You can get that on any other podcast, or you can take the quick stop over to Motorsport 101 and get the analysis and insight that maybe we're not mainstream or anything, but at least we're not gonna bullshit you when we're delusional.
I see what you did there. Very clever, O'Connell. Well played. Well played. Beautifully done.
Please send all comments to @RyanEricKing at jalopnik.com.
Oh no, we can't do that to him. No, that's I can't disagree with any of that. I think it's a classic argument. Don't put down to malice what you can easily describe as incompetence, because I know Hamilton was kicking up a big old stink after that race was over before he got promoted into the win because he thought he was on the
105th win. We didn't have to wonder if we wondered, was Silverstone the last time he'd win a race? And as it turns out, no, it wasn't. He now has 2 Grand Prix victories. Probably 2 more Grand Prix victories than we ever would have expected him to pick up this year.
He's the only man not named Max Verstappen in the field right now who has more than 1 win this year. I didn't think Hamilton would be the other guy with repeat wins, especially given the way the field has shaken out in the last 7-8 races. I mean, we're 14 rounds in to the championship now, and I think we're set up beautifully for the summer break right now. Red Bull are clearly not the dominant team they were. They have clearly been caught up on with the field the way that it is right now. McLaren are viable. Very quietly, don't look now that Mercedes have won 3 out of the last 4. Out of seemingly nowhere. Their new front wing design has worked wonders. And I looked at the table for the last 8 Grand Prix. Verstappen, amazingly, despite all of this chaos, Verstappen is still the highest scorer in the last 8 rounds by 15 points. But it's Oscar Piastri that's second on 126. Hamilton 123, Norris 116. Then it's a big gap down to Leclerc, Sainz, and Russell, all with 79 points each in the last 3 rounds. Or 8 rounds, sorry, I should say. But they're all tied. And Russell has probably been robbed of 40 points through no fault of his own, poor guy.
Yeah.
At least 25 from this race. And of course, he had the water failure in Silverstone, and he was running top 5 there as well, and probably would have had a podium finish.
I don't know if Mercedes is back, but I think it's clear that any fears of them being written off until the next regulation cycle were greatly exaggerated.
There is a genuine convergence in the field. I mean, if there is one beautiful image that's come out of this Grand Prix, it was that DRS train, because it showed, at least for a little while, we have 4 genuinely competitive teams at the front of the field that can compete for wins.
It's 2009 all over again. Like, nobody's catching Max Verstappen in the championship race.
Probably not, no. I mean, Max has got, like, it's amazing. Again, despite all the chaos, Max extended his championship. It's back up to 78 points. He's got 3 rounds left with 10 to play.
Because unfortunately, Lando Norris lately has been leaning into the reputation that all of his haters, doubters, and critics believe in. He had another suboptimal start, and did not convert in a pole position. He has a worse pole to win conversion record than Charles Leclerc at this stage.
It's wild, but yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a shame because Lando, his raw speed is now as good, if not maybe number 1 in the entire field now. When he is on it, he is incredibly fast. But
yeah, man, I remember when Lando Norris' reputation not too long ago was built on whens and not ifs.
Yeah,
I felt like just last year.
And now it's like, how does Lando keep making little mistakes that keep opening the door up for Max? Because, like, that start, given that this was a race where track position was king, where 7 of the 8 leading runners were on 2-stop strategies, that cost him dearly. And again, I'll give him this. I think Verstappen very quietly drove a brilliant race to come back from 11th up to 4th in the end once you factor in the disqualifications, because he was put on the wrong strategy. He was given 2 medium tire sets, and the medium tire was clearly not the race tire to be on. And he was on the mediums in his final stint, and he had to hold off Lando Norris behind him, who was on the faster hard compound tire, which McLaren let him push, unlike Hungary, and was still closing in on Charles Leclerc. And if that race was 1 lap longer, he probably beats Leclerc for a podium finish. I think Max is probably the only driver in the world who can do that. He's incredible right now, and the Red Bull is clearly not the fastest car anymore. At least in my opinion, it's not been the fastest car for quite some time now. And Max is still getting pretty good results out of it. I mean, no one's scoffing about going from 11th to 4th on the day. That's a good result.
I guess I was just used to thinking, like, right, how many laps does it take for him to get back up to P1? And the race didn't play out like that. But in the grand scheme of things, when you take that into consideration, yeah, Max Verstappen is driven slander-proof in a car that's not so good, which is weird as to why so many Red Bull people are freaking out that, he suddenly can't get the job done anymore, all on his own, which is weird because all I've been hearing the last 2 years is all this bombast, like, we're at Red Bull, we got Max Verstappen and Adrian Newey in Honda. Why do we need anything else? 2 of these components are leaving, and if things go weird in the 3rd one, maybe the other one leaves too. I don't know, man.
I mean, I think my ultimate prediction about how this has played out for Red Bull is coming to pass, where it's going to be business as usual as much as possible outside of Newey leaving, and how, again, we're going to find
and
out.
Honda leaving as well.
And Honda leaving as well, but we knew that going in. It's just going to be a matter of how does Red Bull handle the day-to-day, and we're going to find out just how much influence Newey had on this team. Because Pierre Wache and his department have generally done a fantastic job in the last few years on that day-to-day grind and turning Red Bull into a championship winner. I just wonder how much variance, how much development is there left in this car, in this set of regulations for the last year and a half it runs. We've got, 35, 40 roughly hybrid era races before we get a brand new regulation set. Were Red Bull just the first to get to the finish line when it comes to the overall development of this car? We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, it doesn't hurt to have a 78-point lead going into that zone to find out. Even when Brown GP lost their initial top speed advantage early in 2009, Button's lead was so big that it's just it just didn't matter.
Even Vettel's and Webber's best efforts weren't going to be enough to catch them. Or even if Hamilton and Raikkonen and Massa had a good car, or if Massa was still healthy.
Well, that was it. Yeah, that was it. The chasing pack was so good. They all just tripped over each other. No one could really land any big counter punches towards Brawn. And in the end, they all ran out of time. Vettel was probably 2 races short. I think he was 11 points off in the end in the driver's title. And Jensen won it around early in Brazil for that very reason. People thought Brazil was the finale that year. It wasn't. It was Abu Dhabi. People forget that bit. But I mean, it's going to be fascinating to see what McLaren can do about that. but Verstappen's still 1-10 to win the championship for good reason on UK bookmakers. Let's put it that way.
Only a catastrophic setback, like an injury or scandal, something like that, is going to put any torpedo. I did notice something. Piastri's getting closer to Norris in the point standings.
34 as it stands.
32.
So is McLaren ready to pin their tail to the mast and say, Lando, you're our lead guy, or are they just going to let those two dudes trip over each other?
We thought that opportunity was last week.
Yeah, and it's proven me right, because it looks like McLaren can't decide, or they're not committed to making Lando their number one driver.
Which is crazy, because they just gave him a bunch of money, but it shouldn't be crazy in theory, because Oscar Piastri is a 5-star prospect and a highly touted talent for a reason, and now he's proving that at the F1 level.
Yeah, I was skeptical on Piastri for a little while when he came into F1. I'll be the first person to hold my hands up. Dude is quality. He's so cool under pressure. He's incredibly fast. He's not making the little mistakes that Lando Norris is mostly. We'll ignore the missed pit box and that final round of stops, but on a good day, Piastri is basically Lando Norris too, and that's why McLaren are now favourites to win the Constructors' Championship, because they have a well-balanced team, a very fast car, and two world-class drivers. They're doing everything right. If they could do that about their IndyCar team. But also, want to know before we move on real quick?
Yes.
Did you notice something in common about the top 10 of this race?
It's not coming to mind for me. Refresh my memory.
The top 10 runners in the field at this race were all Formula One race winners. It was the first time in the sport's history that the top 10 were all 10 F1 race winners.
Damn, that is crazy. Tough luck, Pierre and Valtteri and George. Also, another fun fact, George Russell became the first driver in 30 years to be disqualified from a win. The last one was, of course, Michael Schumacher at the 1994 Belgian Grand Prix. Same event, same track, 30 years on.
And they actually reckon it might have been the same fault, because they reckon it was because obviously Michael's back then was the skid block, and Chauvelin this morning said it might be that they lost too much off the plank again. So it could ironically be the exact same reason too that we had a race winner disqualified for the first time in 30 years. The parallels are actually uncanny. It's just former Mercedes driver the first time round as well. Wild. Yeah,
it's crazy. 2 Mercedes disqualifications in the last calendar year. I don't think we need to go having ourselves a mental crisis about what to do with disqualifications. And again, we talked about at the US Grand Prix. If we took the time to inspect every car after the race, we'd be here a while. That's why some series only do the top 4. In F1's case, they just do random spot checks, usually including a winner.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, and it's at their discretion at the end of the day. If we were to scrutinize the entire 160-page rulebook on all 20 cars, we wouldn't have a final result until Wednesday. Because that came up to me as well. Because a little story, maybe if you follow me on Twitter at Dre Harrison 101, one of my old colleagues at Paddy Power texted me about this. Dre, I had an angry customer come up to me and try to cash out a winning bet for Lewis Hamilton to win the Grand Prix. How come it didn't win? And this is this is my old bookies knowledge coming into play here. Because people have asked me about this because of what was on my background. And just to clarify something here for you folks, with pretty much every bookies runs like this, the podium presentation is considered the final result.
Yeah.
So George Russell wins, and if you're in the eyes of the bookies, everything after the podium didn't happen. So
yeah, Russell and you're not guaranteed. You can't bank on a justice refund from Paddy Power every single time shit this happens.
No, absolutely not.
They're pretty good with it, but you can't expect it all the time. And to the other point, it's just why not delay the podium ceremonies? People got places to go, man.
We got
I don't know what
stories.
to tell you.
We got stories to write, videos to film, podcasts to record, and if you've got a winning bet, you want to get paid out. Imagine you coming into a bookies of a winning bet for George Russell that's won the Belgian Grand Prix, and imagine me on the other side of the counter telling somebody, hey, could you come back in 4 hours when the final classification comes through? No, we can't do that.
It's my money, and I need it now.
Yeah, and that's how bookies operate. We want to settle bets quickly so everybody goes home happy. That's the point. If that's it, and imagine if George Russell you had a winning bet for George Russell, and then you find out you've been DQ'd, and we end up paying Hamilton instead. Would that be fair? Absolutely not. We have to draw the line somewhere.
None of this shit's fair, man.
No, exactly. Right. Moving on.
Let's talk about silly season, because we got stuff happening over the last week, days leading into the Grand Prix and days leading out of the Grand Prix. So, the big one, Carlos Sainz Jr., hottest free agent on the board, has signed what is said to be a multi-year deal for Williams, 2025 and 2026 guaranteed. Esteban Ocon, another highly touted free agent. He's been, in my opinion, the better of the two drivers at Alpine, and Pierre Gasly's no slouch. But Esteban Ocon's deteriorating relationship with Alpine, he doesn't have to worry about that anymore, because he's got a multi-year deal with Haas, pairing him with Oliver Behrman, Ferrari Driver Academy prospect. And across the country, Milton Keynes, Red Bull had a crunch meeting following the Belgian Grand Prix in regards to Sergio Perez. Do they keep him? Do they bring in somebody else? And apparently, they've decided to keep him. And all that was good enough. And then we learned that, according to your colleagues at Autosport, Dre, Alpine has made a decision on who they want for 2025. It's not been made official yet, but it's a matter of formality that it will be second-generation racer, F2 alum and reserve driver, Jack Doohan. Oh my God. Alpine Academy common success meme, but it's sincere this time? What the hell?
The first Alpine junior graduated into the actual car since Grosjean in 2011, I want to say.
Romain Grosjean in 2009.
2009. Good God. So it's been 15 years.
To be fair, do we want to remember Romain Grosjean's 2009 stint at Renault, a team that the vibes were rancid, and so was the car?
We don't speak of those times. So which elephant in the room do we address first? I think it's only fair we go Carlos Sainz first here on this one.
Yeah, Carlos Sainz turned down. Carlos Sainz not going to Mercedes, not going to Red Bull.
Nope.
Not going to what is soon to be Audi, going to Williams to partner with Alex Albon. And on paper, that's a really, really strong lineup. And it just makes you think, well, James Vowles and the rest of the Williams gang, you better start getting together a more well-rounded car that is capable of fighting for points on a regular basis, because they did take a step back this year.
Yeah, if you're James Vowles, and he has done exactly what I'm about to say here, I'd be stunting on these hoes for the rest of the season, because you've just signed the man who's fifth in the championship, has been a top 5 driver in Formula One for pretty much half a decade now, has won a Grand Prix each of the last 3 seasons he's been in F1, and is fifth in the standings right now, while you as a team are 9th in the constructors, have had a big regression from last year, and have 4 points in 2024. You just got Carlos Sainz on a 3-year deal? It's a heist. It's a daylight robbery from Williams. How have they gotten such luck that off the back of this, they now have a driver lineup next year of literally bonsai? That's what I'm going to call it now, bonsai. Like the tree. Like having Albon and Sainz is a formidable driver lineup. Yeah. That is as good as anybody in the midfield, quite frankly. And yeah, it's a hell of a coup for Williams and James Vowles, who, again, I don't know what he whispers in his people's ears that is able to just have them drop their pants and convince them to sign this team. The coffee must be incredible at Grove.
Because I don't think Joss Capito ever got this much when in his brief time running Williams.
This man has undeniable amounts of riz because it just keeps working out for him. This has been objectively a horrible year for Williams. Logan Sargent is gone. They had an overweight chassis. They had 27 points last year. They've got 4 so far through 14 rounds this year. Albon has regressed a little bit this year. You gave Sargent another chance, and he's not really improved enough to justify his continued employment. And hell, if you can get Carlos Sainz, you're taking Carlos Sainz. No argument there whatsoever.
This is also going to be the big test for Albon, because will he be closer to the driver last year that was one of the top 5 pound for pound drivers, or will he be closer to the driver that in 2020 at Red Bull gave the team so little confidence that they went and signed somebody who was not a Red Bull junior or a Red Bull athlete because they just need to have somebody in the car?
It's going to be a fascinating test because Albon was universally applauded for his 2023 season. He was, with my colleagues, he was number 10 in the Auto Sport Top 10 last year. He was gassed to high heaven for how well he drove that year, and rightly so. I think it was very much deserved. The problem, the one kicker you could make in that argument was the guy in the opposing car was Logan Sargent, who debatably maybe shouldn't have been kept on at the end of last season. I think people would have understood if he wasn't kept on at the end of last season because he had a rough first year.
Year, a lot of crashes. This year he's been unlucky at times, especially in Australia, but unfortunately the progression's not there. And it's a shame. Ultimately, he did make it, when everything at one point in his career suggested that he was never going to make it to Formula One. But he did it, at least for 2 years. There will be other opportunities, and he's still young enough in his career that in a few years down the road, he'll be a more complete driver in a more competitive situation. But I hate to say it in American, but this just didn't work out. And who knows when we're going to get another one coming around like this.
It's a lot like the Trackhouse situation in MotoGP. If they didn't sign Joe Roberts, there is no bright American prospect that's going to make it up the ladder and be the next guy. And unfortunately, because a lot more of them are staying in the IndyCar ladder now, and that might be where Sargent ends up next year. I know Prima have admitted they've had talks of him already as an alum from the team. It makes sense.
I mentioned on the podcast before Logan Sargent signed that Williams developmental deal, he had a test lineup with AJ Foyt Racing, and then he called it off to go sign that Williams deal.
And understandable. So Logan has got every chance to end up in a Prima IndyCar next year, and that would be a fine landing spot for him, for a guy that was a solid Formula 2 driver. Maybe just a jump too big for Logan in the end.
F3 title contender not too long ago against guys in Oscar Piastri, who Grand Prix winner, and Theo Pourchaire, who just probably should be here, but just can't get a fucking break anywhere.
Yeah.
I want to also talk about Esteban Ocon, the man that I think is the most overhated man in Formula One right now. Going into a Haas team, well, let's put this past weekend aside because that was awful for Haas. But generally speaking this year, Haas has been good. And I'm really, really intrigued about this matchup of Esteban Ocon, a Grand Prix winner, a man who has been a solid midfield driver for a number of years, and Oliver Behrman, the 1B, or at least a close number 2, top prospect on the board in Formula 2, despite the fact that his season is objectively cursed.
It certainly feels that way. And this is, again, another fascinating matchup. Esteban Ocon, who, let's not forget, as recently as a year or so ago, was keeping Fernando Alonso honest in an Alpine in his own right. And a guy that has been better than Pierre Gasly since they've been teammates as well, in my opinion. And Ocon is a guy that in another universe, in another life, would be contending for top-end machinery. And he's been very unfortunate to have never had that opportunity fall on his shoulder. The timing's just never quite worked out for him in that sense. But
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a good move for all parties. I mean, Haas are a team on the up by the looks of it. Ayuka Komatsu has done a very solid job with this Haas team so far. It's a driver on, I think, if not maybe even slightly better than Hulkenberg's level, who's going the other way towards Audi. We've known that for about 4 months now. But I think Ocon filling those boots of Hulkenberg is a very, very solid guy to see if you can reinforce the progress that team has made. They're in 7th right now. They have a genuine shot at 6th, in my opinion, against RB. Which no one saw coming going into this season. We saw them in preseason testing looking rough, and we thought, they're going to be bottom dwellers again.
And the vibes were so rancid because Gunther Steiner had left the team because Gene Haas wasn't going to spend anything, and Gene Haas said, well, we don't need to spend anything. We got all the resources in place. And as it turns out, maybe Gene is a little bit vindicated, although with some recent investments out of his NASCAR program, you got to think like, well, if you're going to spend money in motorsport, there's only one place you can spend it now.
Yeah, it's a weird one. I don't think Steiner necessarily should have been fired off the back of last year's season, but Komatsu's come in. They talked a big game about having an engineering vocal point be the leader of the team, and it's hard to argue it hasn't worked out. The car isn't a pig anymore. It's good on its tires. It's still fast over a lap, and their race pace is a lot better.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Dre, are they actually putting upgrade packages together that aren't sending them back down the grid?
Very much so. Like they are
2024 in big 2024, man.
Yeah, they're not just having one big upgrade package that may or may not work once a year. They're actually developing as they go throughout the year, and being proactive with upgrades rather than just waiting for a big one. They're just throwing what they can at the car when they feel like it might have an impact, and it's worked. And yeah, again, Ocon and Behrman is a very, very nice pair. It's a very nice team, an A-plus prospect, a 5-star prospect, alongside a top 10 driver in the field in Esteban Ocon. Love that move for all parties. Ocon needed a clean break from Alpine, clearly, at this point. And Haas gets a fresh start with 2 new drivers, and I think this is going to work out a lot better than the last time they hired 2 new drivers at once, to say the least.
Yeah, it is what it is. And for Kevin Magnussen, looking like it's the end of his time in F1, I'm willing to say that he probably overstayed his welcome a bit. But I look back on it and think it should have never fizzled out like this, man, because he broke into the sport with all the hype, all the prospects, and he got on the podium his first try. And it never materialized after that, spending every move after that pretty much in midfield purgatory. I think Haas is forever indebted to the fact that he helped right the ship in 2022, considering how awful the vibes were back then. That 5th place result was huge, and did it arguably lead to him overstaying his welcome a season too long? Probably, but
yeah, I think I completely agree. Like, K-Mag was a solid pair of hands for a very long time in Formula One, and that is already a compliment to his ability. I think he has dropped off a little bit in the last 2 years compared to where he's normally at. But on a personal standpoint, the man's fun, and F1 needs more fun. He was a guy that was one of the few drivers, in my opinion, that was prepared to push the envelope to see what would happen. And we need dudes like that in this sport. He would race you hard, and he would expect to be raced hard in return. And that is fun, quite frankly. There's a reason I've nicknamed him the Arbiter of Chaos, because that's what Kevin Magnussen was, and I'm going to miss him. He was fun. The sport needs fun.
Absolutely. Whatever he does after this, I'm sure he'll succeed. Just like his father, who didn't realize all his potential in F1 for many reasons. Jan had an incredible second career. Am I saying that Kevin Magnussen is going to go tear it up in prototypes or GT cars after this? Nobody knows. We don't even know what Magnussen's doing in 2025. I certainly don't, but whatever he does, I'm pretty sure he'll do all right with it. Before we get to the big one, Jack Doohan to Alpine.
I actually want to swap this one around because I want to bundle Jack in with the rest of Alpine in the last section. So I'm going to go. I'd like to go Checo on this one first.
Oh, okay. Because this was the one that I was just like, okay, I know what you're here for. I know what you're here for. You're here to talk about Sergio Perez. He's staying. He's staying whether you or I or anybody else likes it. And there's not a doggone thing you could do about it.
I think they made the right call. And that might be seen as controversial in some circles. I did write a very long piece trying to weigh up all the options. And ultimately, when I was breaking it down, I just said to myself, if you're talking about dropping a dude mid-season, there is no good option, quite frankly. Like shit has got to be bad if you're even considering something like this. What I would say is that I don't think it's worth throwing the baby out with the bathwater, as we say in the UK, and dumping, 3.5 years of data on Checo, hauling likely would have been Daniel Ricciardo back in like Uncle Daniel back in 2018.
I guess what the thing is, like, you correct me if I'm wrong with this, is that they were supposed to have a test in like the coming days between Ricciardo and Lawson.
Yes.
And whoever won that shootout, based on all the data they gathered, was going to get the seat.
Will Buxton put that out there publicly during the F1 TV broadcast in Belgium? I can't confirm or deny whether that was actually true or not, whether that was going to be taken as a serious shootout as to who would get the seat. But there was a filming day that would be the coincidence. Maybe it was just a pure coincidence that was coming around the summer break, right when Checo's job was under the most amount of pressure it's ever been. And this was a disappointing race for him to start on the front row and then finish up in 7th in the end, and having all the big boys overtake him over the course of the race. I can understand why people were mad about it, but what I would say is that there was no good option. Like, starting over again with Daniel, is just as high risk. There's no guarantee that 2018 Daniel Ricciardo is still there if you plug him back into that car with a completely different car 6 years on from the last time he actually drove for you. And if anything, Ricciardo's been fine since coming back to Racing Bulls. He's traded shots with Yuki Tsunoda. I know Tsunoda's leading the head-to-head overall, but honestly, it's so tit for tat between them right now. It almost makes me go, well, there's no defining driver in the RB camp who's better. So that probably just hurts both of them as an argument as to who to, if you were going to make that decision to promote somebody, you're going, well, who's been better this year, Tsunoda or Ricciardo? My gut says
as a Team Faenza fan, like that kind of dynamic is great for me, but in terms of the dynamics of like who's going to step up to the Red Bull seat, like, if you're Daniel Ricciardo with all this experience, you should be beating a guy that people within the team suggest has not matured or improved since 2021, when Yuki Tsunoda debuted. And if you're Yuki Tsunoda, you're thinking like, this guy Daniel Ricciardo hasn't been on his game since he left Team Enstone in 2020. And you're getting ahead a lot of the time, but nobody sees you as that guy.
Yeah.
So then what does that leave? You have Liam Lawson, who they are ultra conservative with for whatever reason, and yet they still like him more than any other option in the Red Bull Junior team.
And you'd be promoting him into F1 full-time with one of the best cars on the grid with a 5-race sample size behind him. An F1 season nowadays is nearly 5 times the size of that. It would have been ultra risky to run Lawson like that straight away. So look, I get it. I get why. I actually kind of raised an eyebrow at the fact that when Red Bull announced that Perez was staying, they actually took a degree of accountability and said, maybe we've not supported Checo as much as we could have done ourselves, and we need to look at ourselves in the mirror and go, how can we support him? Hey, here's a bit of advice for you, Christian. Maybe don't have the other head of driver development run to his friends at the German and Dutch media every time this comes up, saying that your boy Checo in the car was shit. Just a thought. When he's not racially abusing him anyway. Just thought I'd throw that one out there as a suggestion. To me, keeping Checo makes sense. The issue I have with this whole situation is, what does it say about the state of Red Bull's umbrella that the man who has scored 28 points in the last 8 Grand Prix in one of the strongest cars in the field, that's 3.5 points per race.
Okay.
What does it say about the state of Red Bull as an umbrella when he scored 28 points in the last 8 rounds and you couldn't come up with a tangible argument to replace him with any of the other drivers you've got either in your 2 teams with 4 cars between them and your academy? It's not good enough, RJ. There's no getting around it.
Is this your motor company? Is this your cracked aero department? Is this your best chassis? Is this the team that has been blighting out all the sun for everybody else? Not anymore.
It's the Max show, and it goes to show you just how dependent they are on Max at this point, because if you look at the rest of their foundations, and like I said, this is a team that has more resources than anyone else on the grid. It's got 2 teams, it's got 4 drivers, it's got all the data in the world to evaluate talent, and it's got one of the longest, if not the longest running driver academy in the sport, with genuinely good drivers beneath them, like Isaac Hadja, who's won 4 feature races this year in F2, leading the championship right now. Arvid Lindblad is 16 and is looking very solid at F3 in his own right as well.
We forget Ayumu Iwasa is having a season in Super Formula that is like at most a half step worse than Liam Lawson's this time last year.
And Iwasa's got no chance of getting into F1 by the sounds of it. Like, what does it say about you as an overall company, and a company that's prided itself on discovering generational talent like Sebastian Vettel, like Max Verstappen? Daniel Ricciardo was your number 3 all-time driver, and he had 8 wins to his name under your colors. That's the floor, right? What does it say about you if Sergio Perez is your number 2 option right now?
It says they really messed up when Carlos Sainz left the umbrella for other opportunities. I don't know whether it's because
they fucked
him or Max couldn't get along, or Carlos's dad didn't get along with Max's deadbeat dad, or whatever it was. That should have been the combination, and they've blown it, and they've never been the same ever since. Kind of like how Zach Brown treats everything after Alex Palou left them jolted at the altar in IndyCar.
It's not good enough. It's not good enough. And look, and as much as I respect Checo, he cost Red Bull the Constructors title in 2021, and I've got a bad feeling he's going to do that again in 2024. And we're going to have this problem. And then we're going to...
Who else is going to win it for them?
That's just it. And the one person they could have signed that could have rectified this, you didn't go out and get. Because Carlos Sainz is driving for Williams next year. That, for me, is a fundamental failure as a factory team at the highest level. Because, hell, even Mercedes have got allegedly a generational prospect in Kimi Antonelli, and they're almost, with this Sainz news now confirmed, that pretty much guarantees that Antonelli will be in that car next year.
Mercedes is going to make up for the sins of Verlaine's and Ocon's past, and Russell's past, too, by just throwing their 5-star prospect in the water. Straight up.
You gave Lewis Hamilton a 1-year deal because you didn't want to lose the opportunity of bringing Kimi Antonelli into your team. He better fucking work out. That's all I'm saying, because if you're telling Lewis Hamilton to take a short deal because you believe in this kid this badly, you better be right. That's all I'll say.
You better believe that the Mechachrome lottery is as fucked up as it is.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Don't get us wrong. It is kind of fucked up.
Alpine's the last domino to talk about here, because we had, again, a bit of a deja vu moment.
Never a normal day in Viri. Never a normal day at Team.
No, never a normal day. And a year to the day, the Otmar Zafnauer was released from Alpine during the Belgian Grand Prix weekend before having fundamental vision problems with the other big bosses at Alpine. A year to the day, Bruno Faman steps down as interim team. Well, it wasn't interim. He actually was given the job full time this year. He stands down as team principal of Alpine to go back to Viri and concentrate on his main role, which is vice president of Renault's motorsport department. this was alongside the same week we had reinforced rumors from the big players that Alpine is in talks with Mercedes to run their engine for 2026. That's apparently now deep in negotiations. And now that means Viri could be at risk. We're talking possibly 350 jobs in that French department that makes the engines for them over there at Renault.
There's even rumors that there might be a strike coming.
It would be the French way, wouldn't it? I mean, let's be real here.
Yeah.
Apparently, a lot of the internal talk is that Faman stood down almost like as a noble act to trying to protect the people that work in that engine department over there in Viri. He's one of their own. He came from that engine department in the first place, and he apparently wants to try and do right by them, which is, I think, quite honourable in the end. And yeah, you've probably saw the news by now this morning that they announced that Oliver Oakes will be their new team principal, the second youngest team principal
Red Bull Junior is going to run a team.
Yeah, Oliver Oakes is going to be Alpine's fifth team principal in the last 5 years. The second youngest in history. He's only 36 years old himself, and he's going up from running high tech to running one of the biggest F1 teams on the grid. And alongside that, we now know that Jack Doohan will likely be alongside Pierre Gasly in their cars next year. I mean, what the fuck is an Alpine, RJ?
What isn't up at Alpine? Do you think, how long do you think Oliver Oakes' leash is? Moreover, how long do you think Flavio Briatore's leash is? Is he the one really calling all the shots? Did he just backdoor his way out of exile back into power?
It's when I saw the press release drop in my email inbox, that was the first question I asked myself, because when I read it, there was comments in it from Flavio Briatore. Now, I get it. Mm-hmm. They haven't got a team principal right now. You probably want some senior figure at Alpine to comment on, hiring a new team principal. I get that. But as far as I was aware, Flavio joined this team to be a, quote, special advisor. Now, I don't know how deep that role runs, per se. But if you're getting to comment on the press releases of a new team principal hire in an F1 team, that says to me you've got a formidable amount of clout. I don't think that'll be unfair.
He's apparently the only man that has ever set foot into a leadership role at Team Enstone and know how to actually make it work right, because none of the other minds at Formula One are apparently capable of doing this.
Yeah, and from the interviews I heard that Faman gave over the course of the weekend, he was very candid. In full fairness to him, he was extremely candid about the situation. Pretty much openly admitted that he and Briatore did not see eye to eye on the vision and the future of the team. And apparently that did not go over well. I think that might have been part of the reason why he ultimately stood down. He's not been fired. He's just focusing on his other main job. It's more of a realignment, which is what Alpine's been famous for over the last 4 or 5 years, from Laurent Rossi as CEO when Adam Prost was there as non-executive chairman, to Marcin Bidkowski when he was team principal. Remember him? That's a pub.
Yeah, he was apparently keeping an eye on Esteban Ocon in the parking lot or something. I don't know.
Yeah, apparently we still had access to Alpines and where their cars were parked, but I can confirm that was a true story, that Ocon did roll up for Williams in a bright orange car for a seat fitting, thinking he might be able to break out of his contract before it was even over. Shit was wild, to say the least. But that's, again, extremely Alpine things. Well, first of all, my heart goes out to all those in Viri. I really hope this is not the beginning of the end for that department.
I hope so too. Look, we've been harsh on the Alpine Power Unit program and its output. We also know that hey, there's people that are trying their best to make this work.
Indeed, and
some of them are going to be out of work if the worst comes to worst, and that sucks.
Yeah, it absolutely sucks. And look, I'm not going to lie to you. I don't think enough people have talked about this since this was announced, but Oliver Oaks as a hire is kind of sus. There's no getting around it in the sense of...
Do you think that... Because the reason why it's probably sus, because, like, High Tech has a lot of backing from Russia, specifically Dmitry Mazepin and his son, who raced in Formula One for a year and then went on LMP2, where he's not consistently the quickest driver in his LMP2 car. But do you really think this is going to lead to, like, a high-tech power play? Because you've said, like, you don't think they're going to sell.
It's not a seller's market in F1 right now. Like, just being in F1 right now is exponentially increasing your value because you're one of only 10 teams. The sport has made it abundantly clear it does not want to expand. You just being there, and F1, I mentioned it on the show before, F1 is raking in money right now. Their Q1 was 45% up on last year. They're making bank right now. The sport, in their eyes, doesn't need an 11th team, and it's hard to argue against that when the balance sheet looks so good. It's whether you want to agree or disagree with that, and I know the majority of fans disagree, and I'm one of them as much as the next guy, but F1's got more than enough meat on the bone to say we don't need an 11th team, and they're fine with that. So,
well, good. I hope they enjoy being happy and fat.
They probably are, for better or worse. But the way I don't think this is going to be this enormous high-tech power play because Luca Di Maio, who's their CEO, has made it abundantly clear multiple times over the last few months, this team is not for sale. They sold a quarter of it off to, Michael B. Jordan's merry brigade of celebrity influencers.
Brigade of famous athletes and actors.
Yes, the all-star game of influencers. But they still own 76% of their team, and that is worth probably the best part of $1 billion. They could, if the Mazepin family really wanted to, and they can, because at the end of the day, an EU court threw out their sanctions earlier this year, back in March. The Mazepin family are no longer restricted. They could feasibly sneak their way in through the back door. I'd be shocked if Alpine did sell up, because why would they right now? They have it. In their eyes, they want to downsize. Their emphasis has always been try and be a factory team and a competitor, but don't do it by having the same amount of resources as the big hitters like Red Bull, Ferrari, and Mercedes. Try and do it for less. This would be the ultimate way of doing it for less, cutting the engine department loose, running a power unit that they think is reliable, works, and has had proven success at the highest level, and ride off the coattails of being a customer. Hell, McLaren's doing that pretty well right now themselves. So it makes sense. This the whole reshaping of Alpine doesn't sound to me like a team that's selling. It sounds to me like a team that's restructuring. That's how I look at it anyway.
But how many restructures is it going to take for all this to finally start working out? Well, what do we make of Jack doing?
I think it's a sensible hire. I really do. I think it's a sensible hire. I don't think at this point, with Carlos off the board, there isn't a needle mover free agent driver on the market, in my opinion, especially when you've already got Pierre Gasly in your team already. I don't think you need another. There isn't another big hitter on the market. Who's the best guy that could be available now? Valtteri Bottas, potentially? And
even then, like, Valtteri Bottas still has likely an option to stick around at Sauber if he wants to for another year, or he could go do something else. As far as the internal candidates that could take over, you have Mick Schumacher, who is a reserve, who is part of the Alpine company as a hypercar driver. But I'm almost like quietly resigned to the fact that it's not going to happen. And then within the Alpine Academy, like, your number one option is Victor Martins, who not too long ago people weren't sure if he was that good. Now people believe he is that good. But Jack's ahead of him in the queue. He's got the F1 mileage. He's paid his dues. Maybe there is something there.
Victor Martins is a very talented driver, but he hasn't seen a crack in a pavement he's not stepped on for the last 18 months. It's really unfortunate, and unfortunately, this is such a results-driven game, and we have now become even more ruthless about F2 graduates to the point where now, if you're not a 5-star prospect, you probably aren't making it now. Ollie Behrman is now apparently the floor. Good luck, basically, at this point.
Yeah, you got to have clout before you even step foot into an F2 car to really be that guy.
And don't get me wrong, Jack Doohan was good in Formula 2. He won 4 Grand Prix there. He was third in the championship last year. He was often very unlucky on the road.
Exactly. If Martins is a victim of if Martins is a victim of the Mechachrome lottery, Jack Doohan wasn't exactly rolling sevens either.
No, exactly. I think overall it's a very sensible hire. I think if there isn't a big name free agent pool, you lost the Carlos Sainz sweepstakes, which is understandable. You came in at the last minute and your team is a hot mess. You were probably never going to get him. So you lost out. There isn't a big name that's going to come in and immediately make you better overnight. Fuck it. Give it to the academy guy who's got the run time, who knows the team, knows the setup, and was a decent F2 driver in his own right.
And you just think, maybe he's not going to say this deal was signed without my knowledge and consent, and I'm looking to get out of it.
No, he's too busy dealing with being doxxed during the Monaco Grand Prix weekend on F1 TV when Will Buxton kept pointing at his house. As you do. I think he'll be all right. I hope. Don't get me wrong, it's a tough matchup. He's walking into a decent midfield team with Pierre Gasly in the other seat. That's not easy. So I sincerely hope he could hold his own out there, because that's tough. That's a tough matchup, and I hope it works out for him. He's a good guy. It's a great story. Second generation driver. Obviously Mick Doohan was one of the best MotoGP riders of all time, and it's great that his son's gone a different path, but still might make it to the big dance anyway. I think that's
just like Carlos Sainz.
Just like Carlos Sainz, indeed. That'll just about do it for our F-Modus 101 episode this week. Belgium was a fun time. Very much enjoyed that race. F1 is, like I said, back in 3 weeks' time for the Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort. Until then, we got MotoGP this weekend. It's back from its summer break for the British Grand Prix this weekend at Silverstone. One of the headline races of the year. Great time indeed. One of my favorite Grand Prix of the year. And it's the throwback weekend as well, so everyone's going to be rocking throwback liveries this weekend to celebrate the 70th anniversary. Go on, RJ.
And there's just one more thing to mention about the British Grand Prix weekend. For most of our audience.
Yeah, it's free to wear this weekend. There is no excuse. It is free to wear. The Moto2 and MotoGP races are free to air on ITV1, Big Boy ITV this weekend. You have no excuse. Go out of your way to watch it. We need people to watch this damn sport. ITV doesn't give a shit about having free-to-air MotoGP races, so I'm doing the promotion so they don't have to. So go out of your way to watch it. It's on ITV1. It'll be a great time. Moto2's been kicking arse all year long as well. You'll get a great pre-show.
It's crazy. Just like MotoGP, just like F1. We were down on both series, and now going into the summer break and coming out of the summer break in one case, could be really good.
Should be really good.
Gets rolling in.
Yeah, I was going to say, is there a genuine thunderstorm going on outside your house?
Yes, there is. This is a thunder. This is the power of MotoGP. It's back and it's better than ever, and it's free to watch. Please give us a good trio of races.
Indeed. MotoGP this weekend, British Grand Prix. We'll be back to review and talk about that on next week's show. But until then, I've been Dre Harrison. He's been RJ O'Connell. Thank you very much for listening. We'll catch you guys next time. Sayonara.
Later, y'all. I have the power.